It's honestly kind of wild that Fortnite is still playable on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, we're talking about an 8-year-old console with the power of a dying Android tablet. And yet, here we are. They've added a lot of content to Fortnite in the last year. A full-on survival Lego game, a racing mode, a rhythm game, and heck, they even added freaking Fall Guys. Not to mention the recent releases like the first-person shooter mode, Lego GTA, and OG Fortnite. It's impressive that with all these additions, this is still available on the Nintendo Switch. So today I want to look at a bunch of these new modes and break down what they had to change to get them to work on Nintendo's little hybrid console. And you'll see just how broken modern Fortnite is on the Nintendo Switch. Let's start with the mode that put Fortnite on the map, Battle Royale. The first thing we need to discuss is obviously the game's graphics. And as my friend Mario would say, wowie zowie. They are clearly downgraded compared to what people are probably used to. And if you're coming from PC or other consoles, load times are so long that sometimes you'll join a match when the battle bus is already halfway across the map. And then you're met with graphics so bad that you think you accidentally booted up your Nintendo 64. Don't panic though, they do eventually load back in. But it takes the Switch a few moments to figure out what the heck is even happening. The first few minutes of any match can be rough. These trees and grass look like they are pulled right from a Nintendo Wii title. Once you eventually load in and land, the first thing you'll need to do is seek out some loot, which should be pretty easy, unless, the assets aren't loaded in yet. You'll also notice that the first several minutes of the round, the Switch will hitch and stutter regularly, especially as you explore the map because the game needs to load all the new assets on the fly. Another huge drawback is the draw distance, which is very limited with most assets, like with the grass. You can literally see the grass popping in front of you, and the terrain just beyond that is completely barren. The same goes with these trees and buildings. While you can see these assets from far away, it's generally a very low poly model until you get very close to them. And oh yes, other players, if you can even see them. While they are visible at all distances, the animations of these characters is normally cut in half. Oh, and they're usually all default skins. Why are they all default skins, you ask? Well, it's simple. The Switch doesn't want to load in those skins. The Switch struggles with having too little memory to load in all these different assets. And sometimes when you start a match, even you are playing as a default skin. What were all these V-Bucks for? One of the most significant issues with this game, especially as a competitive shooter, is that it's stuck at 30 frames per second. Sometimes. It's far from smooth. It hitches very often, especially when there's a lot going on screen. To combat this frame rate issue, the Switch version implements dynamic resolution scaling, which essentially dials back the resolution on the fly so that the Switch doesn't burn your house down. This just makes it easier for the system to run the game when things get intense, but it also tries to make it look better when there's not a lot going on. All this being said, the game actually looks pretty good. I understand I completely contradicted myself, but hear me out. I feel like the most recent update to Fortnite has made it look better than before. Yeah, it doesn't perform perfectly, but comparing it to itself from prior years, I feel like they've done a much better job at optimizing it. Again, still not the best, just better. Like the grass, for example. I don't know who they hired as their gardener, but there seems to be a lot more grass in Battle Royale, at least compared to last year. Yeah, it still doesn't look nearly as good as the PlayStation version, but a bit of grass is nice to see, for those of us who don't go outside to touch the real stuff. Another ongoing issues are the controls. I don't know exactly what it is, but the controls don't feel nearly as tight as the other consoles. And while the frame rate and graphics definitely don't help at all, the controls on Switch aren't really optimized for shooters like this, especially the Joy-Con, which is typically what I'm playing with, as I often find myself playing the Switch version if I can't use the TV. And I think this is how a lot of Switch players play it as well. It's just extremely hard to aim and be precise with these dinky sticks. For this reason, a lot of people prefer to turn on gyro aiming, especially for shooters on the Switch, like Splatoon. And luckily you can do this in Fortnite as well. It really helps when you gotta use these Joy-Cons. And if you really like Joy-Con, you can even get Fortnite exclusive Joy-Con. I have them, here they are. The Battle Royale mode changes very often. The items, the weapons, and even the map itself. So often that I can't believe it runs as well as it does on Switch. It might take a lot of time for the developers to make sure that they don't completely max out the system with a specific update that breaks the Switch, and still release it on time with the other console versions. The Switch version of Fortnite Battle Royale hasn't been perfect, but it gets the job done. A lot of people tell me in the comments that the Switch version for them is fine, and there's no problem. I must just be delusional. And to that, I have to say good for you, but I have. And this is probably a bigger deal to me because I'm just so used to how it plays on PS5, because that's how I normally play it when I'm not doing this for videos. So unlike someone who only has access to this game on Switch, I notice these differences every time I swap between the two. Overall, this mode is a lot of fun and definitely the best part of this game, or at least the most popular. But a big competitive open world game like this is not the best choice for the Switch hardware, and definitely could be better. Now, all that being said, I'll be ranking all these games on Switch based on how well they run and feel on the console. And I know I did a lot of complaining, but still, it's pretty dang good. A tier. And as I mentioned, Battle Royale isn't all Fortnite has to offer anymore. There are a huge amount of other games and modes we can play just to see how well or poorly the Switch handles them, like creator maps. Oh no. In recent years, Fortnite has become this strange metaverse type game where anything is possible. The average Joe, just like you and me and Joe, can now create almost any type of game using the Unreal Engine Fortnite map creator tools and share them online for anyone to enjoy. You have the box fights to show off just how sweaty you can be. You have the wacky ramps, brain rot quiz, and we can't forget about the tycoons. That being said, not every one of these user created maps is necessarily optimized for the Switch itself. You just gotta fire it up and kind of cross your fingers and hope it works. And most of the time, it actually does. A lot of these games are usually completely fine and playable, and I don't really want to point any of them out specifically because these were all made for fun by players, not necessarily developers. But they're here and it's a fun addition. Now, some notable creator maps are those created by partners like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which completely changed the point of view and plays like a side-scrolling beat-em-up, just like the classic Ninja Turtle games. It also adds this cool comic book effect to the whole game and adds a lot of personality to the mode. Now, I don't know if this is a Switch quirk or not, but the resolution on this map is really low. It still kind of works though. And we also got something like the Game Awards map. This looks super low resolution, like noticeably bad. This is where we see a lot of dynamic resolution scaling kick in. When people don't optimize the game for the Switch, it forces the console to axe the resolution. Once again, it's playable but not pretty. Now we've come to one of my most favorite modes, and that's Fortnite Festival. This is a reimagining of the Rock Band / Guitar Hero series. The basics are all here. You tap the controller in time with the music, and it's all fine and dandy. But I have a personal gripe with the Switch version of this game. You see, when you become an experienced pro Fortnite Festivaler and want to climb the ranks and feel like you're actually playing the real guitar, you're gonna want this puppy, the Riffmaster. This isn't even a sponsored segment. I just genuinely really like this. Not only is it a much more satisfying way to play the game, but it adds way more depth and challenge to someone who plays this mode a ton and wants to change things up. The problem with me is that this device isn't compatible with the Nintendo Switch. It's only available on Xbox, PC, and PlayStation, because those devices can actually play Festival as intended, which brings me to my next point. The Switch version works, but just barely. First of all, it plays at 30 frames per second most of the time, and does dip, which is a huge problem, because you know, it's a rhythm game, and keeping rhythm is important, and that becomes much harder when you're dealing with an inconsistent frame rate and input lag. Fortnite Festival on Nintendo Switch is actually just kind of bad. There were quite a few times when the game would just lag or hitch when there were a lot of notes on the screen, which is a huge deal. This literally affects the entire game, and there's almost no point to trying to get perfect because it's impossible in these cases. Just look at how much tighter the PlayStation version looks next to the Switch. Even after calibrating the game, it ends up being out of sync eventually because the performance was so bad. The game also chugs with the amount of stuff happening in the background, like the effects on the skins and the hundreds of character models in the crowd, which don't look good at all, but they're all still here. So not only are they ugly, but they actively make the experience on Switch worse. Now, the real reason they needed to add these shots of the band in the background was so that the Switch players would actually buy the festival cosmetics in the item shop. But I'm convinced that if they did remove the action in the background, we could actually play this game at a stable frame rate. Dare I say even 60 frames per second. And this is one of those rare cases where I won't defend 30 frames per second in games. A game like this needs to be as smooth as possible. This game mode is just not good on Switch if you take it seriously, like me. They fixed a lot of things since launch, but the inconsistent performance makes this unplayable for me. If you actually want to play this mode, get it on any other device. And heck, throw in a Riffmaster if you're a real one. I'll throw it in the description if you want to check it out. And next we have a sad one, Rocket Racing. This one is, it's tragic. Out of all the new Fortnite games added, this one seems to be the most forgotten, generally less than 5,000 playing at a time. This one is essentially an entire racing game from the team that gave us Rocket League. Personally, I freaking love this racer. It actually brought something fresh to some of the more recent kart racers I've played. Unlike a lot of racing games, this one actually felt like you were flying. With the addicting drifting and boosting, while also being zero gravity for most of the race, this game had a lot of potential in my eyes, especially when creators could make custom maps for this as well. But as mentioned, I was clearly wrong, which is baffling to me because I love this mode and I find myself playing it often. But I guess that's just me. I like bad games, I guess. But on the Nintendo Switch, the first thing you'll notice is a real shocker. The resolution and frame rate are low. Who could have seen this coming? The resolution is even lower than modes like Battle Royale, and the textures barely exist. So much so that everything on the ground is blurry. But arguably, the worst part of this mode is the draw distance. In a racing game, I would say it's very important to, see where you're going. I noticed that in some tracks, the pop-in is very bad, and the track looks morphed in front of you. So it's kind of difficult to tell where the drivable path actually is. It's easier after you played a track a few times so you actually know what to expect, but the first time you play a track might be a little difficult. And of course, just like the other modes, there's lots happening, the frame rate is a silly guy. I still love this mode and I have fun with it. Regardless, I'm gonna put it in B tier because it's playable, just not the best experience. Next we have LEGO Fortnite. This is one of the coolest game modes they've added, and dare I say, one of the coolest uses of the LEGO IP see in video games. It's an entire survival game experience inside of Fortnite. And they pretty much remade every single Fortnite skin to have a LEGO version. That's wild. Now, I could go in depth on how to play this game and the overall mechanics, but chances are, if you're interested in this type of game, you've already tried it out, especially since it's free, just like every game mode I've talked about in this video. Basically, it's a survival game along the lines of Minecraft, where you collect various resources around the map so you can build tools, weapons, buildings, and villages. Heck, shortly after release, they added vehicles to the mix, which was a huge lifesaver, as getting around the map was always a chore in the early days of this game. There are also a ton of enemies to fight, and they are consistently updating the game, like adding the Big Dino Colombo, and even Star Wars, and even a new one, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And yes, this is technically another LEGO Star Wars game. LEGO Fortnite is very addicting once you get into it. Delving into the mines, exploring the map to power yourself up, and also upgrading your village is a ton of fun, and definitely kept me coming back for a while. The problem I faced with revisiting this game recently is that there seems to be nothing I'm working toward aside from just leveling up my village. Yes, the village upgrading is fun, but that only satisfies for so long. And I was able to upgrade a village to max in just a few days. At this point, or the time I was writing the script, you just needed to find your own fun. You can build a massive village, but a lot of cool things to bring to your world are locked behind a paywall in the item shop. Also, there's not much of a point to continuing to add to your village if you've already upgraded it to the max. I think the biggest part of this progression system is that there's no real end game. For example, Terraria has a ton of bosses and even a final boss to fight. Minecraft has the Ender Dragon. But there's nothing for me to overcome once I've upgraded my village. There are some very strong enemies and resources to collect, but what's the end goal? I want to keep playing, but there's not much driving me back, is how I felt until just recently. I already wrote that whole progression part on the script before I heard that there was going to be a brand new game that includes this big storm boss guy. That's right, they did exactly what I felt they needed to do, add a massive end game boss, along the lines of the Ender Dragon from Minecraft. And they technically did. So of course, I had to jump back into the game mode and check it out. This mode is now called LEGO Fortnite Odyssey instead of just LEGO Fortnite. In LEGO Fortnite Odyssey, your goal is to take on the Storm King and his storm-powered army. Now out in the world, massive storm systems can now pop up randomly on the map. These storms are packed with lightning strikes, hidden secrets, and dungeons at their center. Each dungeon holds a piece of the Storm King's power, and clearing one makes the storm dissipate for a while. After 24 hours, the dungeon will reset with new puzzles and challenges, keeping things fresh. So it's kind of like an Ender Dragon in one way, except the Ender Dragon can only be beaten like once, and this is meant to be beaten over and over again. So it's something. Technically not an end game thing, but it feels like it should be. There's also an updated crafting system where you can build stronger weapons to help take on tougher enemies. This was a nice addition to the game, but unfortunately didn't make me come back for too long. I'm sure just like with Minecraft, I'll end up getting a renewed craving for it at some point, at which I'll start from the top. But would I do that on Switch? Well, the PS5 version of LEGO Fortnite looks absolutely stunning. Everything down to the textures on the plastic figures. But when compared to the Switch, that simply isn't here. The resolution and textures are severely downgraded like we're used to. The foliage on Switch is heavily reduced, and the grass doesn't even spawn on some parts of the map. It's just a flat green surface. This could be a glitch, but I don't know. Speaking of, when there actually is grass, it's not very detailed, and it has very noticeable pop-in, just like every other mode. It does the same thing as Battle Royale, where the models in the distance are low poly until you walk up. It's just very noticeable. The overall lighting and shading are good though, so yippee. We also can't forget about the frame rate. It's 30 frames per second and chugs very often as you traverse the map. Shocker. Now when it comes to LEGO, they've also included several creator maps, some directly from the LEGO team, and these are a ton of fun. These are the typical creator maps you might see in traditional Fortnite, just now LEGO, like the freaking Toy Shop Tycoon. This is the first Tycoon I've actually really enjoyed in Fortnite, and I must say, I really like it. I've been addicted to it. Help. Overall, the LEGO mode is B tier. Good enough. The simpler art style helps this one out a bit. One of the newest additions we have is Fall Guys in Fortnite. Yes, that's right, Fall Guys. I'm not really sure why they decided to do this crossover, but it happened. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this, and this isn't the traditional Fall Guys experience that many players might be familiar with. And it's not even just another battle royale featuring these little beans either. It's mainly an alternative way to enjoy more creator maps. They were a part of battle royale mode for like 10 days until they were removed because the season was done. It just felt like a way to show off these Fall Guys in Battle Royale. Didn't even add anything aside from some minor loot from what I can remember. The beans are a little more limited here since they don't really have the fun grabbing mechanic like in the original games. However, it does feel very familiar to Fall Guys from what I remember. The jumping, the diving, and even the sound effects are all there, just wrapped up in a Fortnite bow. One really neat aspect is that similar to those LEGO skins, you get special skins for every bean in Fortnite, and they all match, except for a few. Probably due to licensing issues, but still, so fun. Yay. Now we're getting into the new mode. modes, and technically. This is the OG mode, Fortnite OG. Now, one thing you should know about me is that I've never been an OG Fortniter. My Fortnite obsession didn't start until Chapter 4. I was pretty late to the party, so the OG mode never really meant much to me. That's not to say I didn't play a few rounds back when it launched in 2017, because I did, but I never really got into it. Building was too complicated for my smooth brain, and I just wasn't skilled at shooting games like this, so I gave up pretty quickly. And with all that said, I'm still not a huge fan of this new permanent OG mode because, well, it just feels like an outdated version of Fortnite. After playing several matches, I found that the pace felt much slower compared to the modern Battle Royale experience I'm used to, and that makes sense. There are no vehicles, no enhanced mobility, and oh yeah, I hate building, so I play zero build, because that's just what I do. This map simply isn't designed for non-builders like me. It might sound like I'm complaining, and I am, but honestly, this is exactly why people seem to love it. This is the OGest Fortnite yet, with classic weapons and the old map with slightly updated visuals. For the OG players, this is a nostalgic dream come true, and I'm happy for you all, but to each their own. Now, how does it perform on Switch? Well, the resolution and the frame rate remain more consistent because there's just so much less happening in OG Fortnite. It actually runs a bit better on Switch than some other game modes. Sure, you still get the occasional frame dips, and it's not free from the usual Switch quirks like limited draw distance, but thanks to the game's overall slower pace and fewer assets, it performs pretty decently on the Switch. And that's all I've got. I suck at OG Fortnite. So for OG Fortnite on the Switch, A-tier experience. It might not be my favorite, but it performs really well. One of the newer additions to modern day Fortnite is Ballistic mode. The Switch has been sorely lacking a 5v5 team-based shooter along the lines of CSGO and Valorant for a long time. And finally, here it is. But frankly, it feels weird that something like this is even on this console. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it. It's just weird to think that it's even possible. And the fact that it's free and part of Fortnite, that's even crazier. Now I'll admit, I'm not a big first-person shooter guy. These games generally demand, well, skill, which I don't have. And it's not that I dislike them, it's more that I just don't play them all that much. I've tried Call of Duty and I think it's a fun series, but I usually gravitate towards the campaign rather than online multiplayer. That's just my style, don't judge. I still enjoy giving these games a shot. Because guns? Just to see how things go. And well, I literally suck at this game. Each match splits players into either attackers or defenders. Attackers need to plant a rift point device at one of the two spots on the map to cause chaos. And the defenders, they need to stop them at all costs. There are no respawns either. Eliminate the other teams or secure your objective to win the round. After 6 rounds, the teams swap roles, and the first to 7 points wins. If you've played either Counter-Strike or Valorant, you know the deal. I haven't, this is just what I've heard. You start with just a pistol and 800 credits to buy upgrades. You earn more credits by scoring eliminations or successfully planting the device and then spend them on weapons, shields, and tactical items in between rounds. If you survive a round, you'll keep your gear for the next one, except for used consumables. When attackers plant the rift point device, defenders only have 45 seconds to find it and defuse it. If you fail, then boom, it's game over for anyone caught in the blast radius, gear included. As I spent more time with this mode, I found it increasingly more fun as I got used to its mechanics. I enjoyed finding the perfect hiding spot to ambush someone or rushing ahead and planting a device myself. However, this game mode seems to suffer from the Switch's mediocre performance more than any other. Competitive shooters like this often demand lightning fast reflexes, and the Switch's 30 frames per second make that a challenge. Aiming needs to be precise, and the Joy-Con controllers make that frustrating, if not impossible to pull off accurately. Even with the Pro Controller, I found it difficult to hit my target consistently when under pressure like this. The gyro controls felt different too. Not worse, just different. Most likely because of the changed perspective. I stuck with them because they still make aiming a lot easier on the Switch, but when I played on my PS5, the experience was noticeably smoother and felt more intuitive, and I wasn't even using gyro. Sure, I'm still bad at the game, but at least it felt like it was more of a skill issue than it was a control issue. The graphics overall are a bit glitchy, and the game can be surprisingly buggy at times. For example, I noticed walls glitching in and out if I turn my camera quickly, or certain textures failing to load properly in parts of the map. And most frustrating of all, occasionally the game just wouldn't work. I encountered infinite loading screens that would never put me in a match, or moments where I was completely immobile, stuck watching everyone else play while I was waiting to take a bullet. And there were even some noticeable server issues. To be fair, this is a brand new game, and I'm playing it right after its release, so there are bound to be issues like this for the devs to iron out over time. I'm optimistic these problems will be addressed as the game continues to develop, but they were frustrating nonetheless. That being said, the biggest gripe wasn't even that I was playing it on my Switch, though the Switch doesn't help. For me, it was the sheer amount of waiting involved, especially if you die early, which I did a lot. I found myself stuck waiting and waiting. It didn't help that the team balancing was off in most of the rounds I played. There was usually one incredibly skilled player carrying their team across all 7 rounds, making the experience feel unbalanced and frustrating, unless they were on my team, in which case it was a lot of fun. Now, before you spam the comments telling me to get good, I understand that not responding is part of the game's design, but when you combine those wait times along with the Switch's painfully long loading times, it becomes exhausting. Hopefully matchmaking improvements will address this in future updates, but it stood out to me in my time with this game. Regardless of that, I'm still looking forward to seeing what the first person mode brings, and I'm also excited to see what the community makes for this in regards to creator maps, but for now, it just feels a little broken on the Switch. Playable, just a little broken. C tier. And finally, we got the newest mode, LEGO Brick Life. LEGO Brick Life is a social roleplay experience set in the expansive city of Brick Bay. You can explore the city with up to 31 players, take on various jobs, decorate your home, and interact with others in this LEGO world. Basically, it's GTA Online, but in LEGO, and in Fortnite. You can choose a variety of professions for your brick persona. At launch, you'll find roles like delivering packages, teaching as an academy professor, and even making sushi. And switching jobs is easy. You just pick a new one whenever you're bored of the last one. Companies will occasionally post job requests via your in-game phone. This allows you to make more in-game money sometimes too. Your wardrobe of outfits from LEGO Fortnite is also fully accessible. You can even change your outfit in the middle of the game at any point, which is awesome. You can even purchase and customize your own homes with a full furniture catalog at your disposal. You can design your space however you like. Plus, any decor bundle or builds you've unlocked in LEGO Fortnite will carry over here. So that's good. For those players who are into the whole decorating and customizing thing, this is a great way to show off your creativity without having to dive into LEGO Fortnite survival mode. That said, sadly, this game resets after you leave. You keep the money you've earned, and your house and decorations stay intact, but every time you rejoin, you have to claim a new plot because the game places you in a completely fresh server. You keep your progression, but nothing is truly persistent here. This system helps keep the city lively and encourages interaction with new players, but it's also a bit jarring and not something I've experienced before. It does make me question why this game even needs to be online. Most of the time, for me, it feels like a solo experience. The multiplayer aspect feels like background noise. I rarely interacted with other players, so the big online component felt kind of unnecessary. Now, to be fair, I only played it for a few hours, so there could be more cooperative elements I haven't seen yet. But from what I've experienced, the game is mostly about you doing your own thing in a bustling city filled with others just fooling around. And speaking of doing your own thing, there's an overall lack of direction in the game. Sure, there are jobs you can take on, which is great in theory, but they often feel disjointed. For example, when I worked at the sushi restaurant, I'd complete a task, but then it would take forever for them to give me another one. In the meantime, I have to go find something else to do until I could land another job. The bigger issue for me is that none of this progress really feels that meaningful. It just feels like an open world sandbox where you can casually unlock rewards, decorations, and just vibe, which is fine if that's your thing. But it makes me wonder what the long-term goal is. Now, to be fair, I found it pretty fun to unlock new vehicles to drive and some decorations, but then what? You just drive around? Maybe it's because I don't play this type of game often, or I might just be looking at it from the wrong perspective. There are also some tasks that don't give clear instructions, like deliver something to Marigold. What counts as something? Where is Marigold? Who is Marigold? The game doesn't provide a location or any guidance, leaving you to wander around aimlessly, wasting time. I even saw other players in the chat expressing the same confusion, so it's not just me. The lack of direction in this game makes this feel aimless. I initially thought this would be more like a tycoon game where you could build on your property and expand, but instead, it's just a random sandbox map where you're left to figure out things on your own until you get bored. There doesn't seem to be much purpose beyond that. The gameplay feels like a watered-down version of LEGO City Undercover. While the two games are obviously very different, with completely separate objectives, LEGO City Undercover has more charm. It had memorable NPCs, drivable LEGO cars, and it ran fairly well on Switch for the most part. I'm mainly comparing it to LEGO City because I heard a lot of people say that this was going to be like LEGO City 2, or heck, even LEGO GTA. The most GTA thing about this is driving cars and bank heists. It's fine for a few hours, but I find myself questioning why I need to come back after unlocking everything, especially if I'm not particularly interested in customizing my home. Could be fun with friends, but honestly, I'm not sure I'd pick this over just playing one of the other game modes instead, like Battle Royale or Ballistic even. I don't love comparing LEGO Fortnite games to traditional LEGO games since they're not meant to be the same, but I kinda wish Brick Life borrowed more from those classic games. For instance, using studs as currency would have been a great touch. Collecting studs by smashing everything in sight was such a core part of the older LEGO games. In Brick Life, you can't smash anything LEGO related. It just makes a lot of the game feel less like LEGO. Other than home customization, there's not much of this mode that made it feel like this needed to be a LEGO game. That said, this is based on one day at launch, so I'm hopeful more content will be added as the game evolves. Now, we have to talk about the Switchness of this whole entire mode, because it's actually insane. On the Switch, the resolution is absolutely atrocious, scaled way back to make the game possible on the hardware. But even that isn't enough. This is, without a doubt, one of the worst worst optimized games I've seen on the platform. For the first time, I'd even call it borderline unplayable. Sure, you can technically play it and get through the experience, but it's a serious struggle and you'll hate yourself for doing it. The frame rate is awful, staying well below 30 frames per second most of the time. On average, I'd estimate it hovers between 10 and 20 frames per second, which is far from acceptable. This has to be due to the sheer number of players and objects crammed into the city. The Switch just can't handle everything at once. Visually, the game feels broken. Draw distance is a major problem. Signs and landmarks often fail to render unless you're practically on top of them, which makes navigating the world frustrating. For instance, I'd head to the gym for a task, but the sign wouldn't load properly, so I couldn't find the building, leaving me wandering. Assets in the world frequently popped in with extremely low poly models, and trees or other unloaded objects can glitch out, sometimes obstructing the camera so you can't see properly. This happens most when checking the map. Everything seems to have to reload once you return to the main camera. NPCs are another issue. Many don't load in properly and appear as ghostly figures. At first, I didn't even realize I could interact with them because they looked incomplete. On top of that, the animation of the characters seemed to be running even slower than the game itself. And there's a constant sense that the world can't fully keep up. At one point, I even got softlocked between a bush and a car, forcing me to restart the game entirely. I'm not sure if that's an issue exclusive to the Switch, but it still happened. To confirm my suspicion, I tested the game on my PS5, and it ran much better there. It's clear the Switch is struggling more and more with these massive, densely packed maps. While the game is technically playable, you have to wonder, at what point will it be simply too much for the hardware to handle? So for Switch optimization, this is going in D tier. Fortnite on the Nintendo Switch is a testament to the developers' dedication to squeezing every last bit of power out of this aging hardware. While the core experience of Battle Royale remains the highlight, many of the newer modes struggle to perform well on Switch due to its hardware limitations. Modes like Fortnite Festival and Brick Life show just how much the system is increasingly unable to keep up with modern gaming, while others like LEGO Fortnite and Creator Maps still manage to deliver fun, albeit with some compromises. Whether the Switch will continue to handle Fortnite's evolution or eventually be left behind remains to be seen, but for now it's a mixed bag of performance. If you're looking for the best experience, you might want to stick to other platforms, but for those dedicated to playing on Switch, there's still some fun to be had, just with a few sacrifices. And of course, I'll see you again next year when I review Fortnite on the Nintendo Switch again. Hopefully, we'll have the Switch successor, but we'll see. If you want to see the rise and fall of Fortnite on Nintendo Switch, click this video. Please consider becoming a channel member, liking and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.